This section is on Genesis 29 and 30. We're going to be fully diving into the rest of Jacob's life here. And with Jacob, we are seeing him, he's moving, he's having to get to the right place. He's going to go be with his family, Laban. His brother Esau wants to kill him, and Rebekah has come up with this idea. Isaac has blessed it, and they sent Jacob off. He's 77 years old. He's to go find some wives or wife. Up until this point, we've only seen a few of them have multiple wives, but Jacob is going to go. So in verse 1 in Genesis 29, it says, "Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern people." So again, we're seeing him move east out of the promised land, back to where Abraham started. And so this was a long journey. It was hundreds of miles. He was trying to get away from his brother. He was trying to start over for a time. We didn't get the idea right off that this was God's plan, but as it went forward, Jacob had that amazing dream, and all of that happened. And it really is confirmed that this is God's plan, and that God says, I'm going to go with you, but then I'm going to also bring you back into the promised land. And so again, Jacob is going to spend several decades out east. So then in verse 2, it says, "There he saw a well in the open country with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well." Okay. So this is very similar to the story that we see when Isaac is going to have a wife. Remember, the servant is sent out by Abraham, and he goes a long way to the same thing, to the same place with Abraham's family, this huge journey, and he gets there and it's by a well, right? Everything keeps happening around the well. And that's where he actually meets Rebekah, is at the well. And you've got to think Jacob's heard this story. So Jacob sees this well. He's finally in this land where he was supposed to be going. But the well is closed over with a large stone. Usually it took several men to move it. So what does Jacob do? Jacob asks, instead of the interaction the servant had, remember, the servant prays and says, let a young lady come out, let her be the one, let her take the water and also offer my camels some. That's not what Jacob does. Jacob sets about, in his own strength, doing some things here. So Jacob asked the shepherds, "My brothers, where are you from?" And they said, "We're from Haran." They replied, and he said to them, "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him," they answered. Then Jacob asked them, Is he well?" "Yes, he is," they said. "And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." Okay, so he's got to be thinking, wow, this is just like the story my dad tells about how he and my mom met. She came out to the well. She was the first one there, except that he hasn't prayed and there hasn't been any discussion with God here. So again, it's sort of similar, but it's sort of not. But we get those elements in this narrative that are kind of leaning towards trying to tell the story again, that Jacob is doing something similar. Laban's daughter comes out. Her name's Rachel, right? Rebekah was Isaac's wife. Now Rachel is going to be the one that catches Jacob's eyes. And unlike that servant who was praying, Jacob isn't. Again, he just asks if this is Laban's, if Laban lives around here. And yes, he's in the right spot. And so again, "Look," he said, "the sun is still high. It's not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture." They said, "We can't," they replied, "until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep." While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. So instead of this being an open well where the lady comes and gives his camels water, he does the thing that men do when they're showing off and moves this incredibly heavy stone all by himself. The other shepherds are like, no, we don't open it right now. We wait till everybody gathers and then we open it together. And that would make sense, right? Sheep kind of need water at the end of the day before they go to bed and everything. And so when the shepherds all collect together, it's kind of communal. They move this big stone off. They water the sheep. Having a big stone would probably make sense so nobody falls in it, probably safety issues and things like that. Again, and that way, nothing can happen to this well. So it takes many men, but Jacob does this on his own. Rachel's there with her sheep. Well, she's here. Might as well water them and get to heading back to her family. But again, shepherding, she was a shepherd. We're going to see in books like Song of Solomon that he offers one of the young ladies to move from vineyard work to shepherding. It sounds like it's easier work for her. Again, sheep are a smaller livestock. And even today, women usually or can be the ones that run whole herds of sheep. Women don't have any trouble with helping them with their not their childbirth, their sheep birthing process, things like that. They have smaller arms. They can pick them up and move them if they need to. They're kind of in that range. Whereas something larger like a cow or a mule might be more difficult for a woman to work with. Sheep were not. So sheep are something that, and again, sheep are pretty tame and docile. They're not going to come chasing after you as a herd or stampede you or anything. So again, to have one shepherd or a woman shepherdess wouldn't have been completely uncommon. Again, like I said in Song of Solomon, we'll see even in that time period that women were shepherdess. And if you look today, you can find some on YouTube and things. Like, it's pretty common out there for women to work with sheep. So Jacob is moving this large stone in front of this young woman, and that's where the story starts. So verse 11 goes, "Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud, just like that servant had done when he found Rebekah." Now, again, when he found Rebekah, he had put that before the Lord, kind of as a question to God, is let her do this, and then I'll know it's her. In this case, Jacob doesn't. He's just come on this huge journey. He gets there, and he's probably relieved. And this beautiful girl comes up, and so he's like, "This has got to be it." And he's weeping, and kiss her. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. So if somebody from your family comes, that's a big journey. You're going to greet them, even if you've never met them before. It's not exactly said why he's weeping, but just, relief that he's found this family, that, they're still alive, they're still around. There's could be all kinds of changes that have happened, but it's still what he expected there, what he was told to do. Again, he wasn't the mighty Esau, the hunter that went out on these things. It said Jacob was one who lived in the tents. And so this was probably his first big journey out, of any means, right? They've never really left the promised land. That has got to be incredibly difficult. He wasn't sent with anyone else to help guide the trip or anything like that. You get the sense that he's by himself. So in verse 13, "As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, 'You are my own flesh and blood.'" So they recognize immediately from his stories. It all checks out. He's really who he says he is. Now, we don't know if he told them a whole story about tricking his brother out of birthright and that he was going to be inheriting and his brother hated him. Like, none of that's necessarily here. All he's saying is, I'm of this lineage, Rebekah's son. They know Rebekah, obviously. It's his brother's house. And they're welcoming him. So everything Rebekah had said was going to happen in this family. She knew her family. That did happen. They welcomed him, and they had daughters his age and things like that. So he's, again, like I said, he's around age 77. He's older. So after Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you're a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." So basically, they're going to start into this agreement. Jacob's there. He's not there as a slave. He's not supposed to be working for free. But again, we'll find out later that Laban does like to kind of take advantage of him, gives him the lowest wage possible and changes things around. But again, so Jacob says, "You know what? That's not really what I want." He knows back home he's going to inherit his dad's sheep and land that they don't own yet. But in verse 16, it says, "Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, 'I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel.'" So here we're kind of starting to get the hint of this story. Leah having weak eyes, there's a couple ways that can be taken. Either she couldn't see well, or it might mean that she wasn't as beautiful as Rachel. But Rachel was very lovely. It says that multiple times. And it also says Jacob really loved her. And that will be a continuing theme. Jacob will continue to really love Rachel through all their years. Jacob seems to have chosen a wife based on human perception. She was pretty, first one to show up. And so again, we're being told this partly between Leah and Rachel to show you what the thought process is here, that one of them is very beautiful and one of them has weak eyes. So maybe not as much. So the narrative, though, will continue to point to Leah as God's choice as the wife. even though it's not Jacob's choice necessarily. So again, this is a complex situation in a narrative history because it's not explicitly saying that Leah's God's choice, but there's going to be things that come up in this that are, we'll just see as the narrative unfolds. Again, like I said, the commentary is not easy in this, whether Leah or Rachel was meant to be the wife or what's going on. But Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. So he's 77 when this starts, and he's 84 by the time he marries her. Yes, they live a long time, but that is a really long time. He's going to live to be about 147, I believe. So 84 is well into halfway through his life. I mean, let's just say someone lives to be 80 or so today. That would be, be over 40 years old at this point. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me a wife. My time is completed. I want to make love to her." So he's done 7 years of labor for Laban, hasn't gotten anything in return except for a wife. So it sounds like Jacob came into the situation without anything to give a wife or to pay a dowry or anything like that. And so he's had to work for it from scratch. You get that sense, right? He didn't bring a herd of sheep with him or something like that. He kind of just left with just about nothing to come here. And I don't know if Rebecca understood what it was going to cost him to have to work off. Maybe she told him something about, like, you're going to have to offer to work, like whatever it might be. So again, Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. And when the morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" And Laban replied, "It is not our custom to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." So now Jacob has gone from the one being the deceiver, having traded himself for Esau, to being deceived. He's now has the older and the younger one have been swapped on him, and it's kind of this like irony in the story, right? Where he swapped the younger and the older, and now this is the younger and the older being swapped. He really wants to marry the younger daughter, but Laban's like, "No, you have to marry the older." Now, shouldn't have Laban brought this up 7 years earlier? We're going to find out later that Jacob's going to accuse Laban of constantly changing his wages, and this would be part of it. "You keep changing things on me without telling me." Again, how all of this goes down, and how the women, obviously Leah probably was involved in this, and who knows what they thought was going to happen here. So verse 27, "Finish this daughter's bridal week, and then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave him servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant, and Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. So now you have a problem, right? You have two wives, they're sisters, and now they're going to be rivals. He's basically, by marrying them both, is making them into rivals. And we'll find out later in Leviticus that Moses explicitly tells them, do not marry sisters. It's never a good plan. So again, this is not necessarily God's plan and perfect plan for all of this, but this is historical narrative. This is what's happening. Again, this is going to be forbidden in Leviticus 18:18. It says, "Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife's living." It's a really bad idea to have rival wives. And we find out later, Jesus says, you're not going to have wives in heaven. And so if you can marry people after someone dies, that's okay. That's kind of what happens. So even here, you could take the sister after the other wife died, but not until then. Anyway, this narrative is going to continue to point at Leah a lot. It's going to continue to talk about the love Jacob has for Rachel, but this constant contention, it's going to lead to problems within their sons. Joseph's going to be Rachel's son, and he's going to be sold into slavery. There's going to be a lot of favoritism among the sons. Rachel's sons are going to be favored. But at the end of the day, it's going to be Leah's son, Judah, who's going to have the main inheritance of the kingly line and the promised line. Granted, all 12 of them are now going to be of the promised line. There's not going to be this Isaac and Ishmael where one of them gets it, or Jacob and Esau, where Ishmael and Esau get kind of cut out of the promised line. All of Jacob's sons are going to be part of the promised line. And so Jacob works another 7 years for Laban. So for 14 years, Jacob is only working for wives. After these years, Jacob would be 91 years old. Rebekah's plans for Jacob that he would only be gone a short time is not going to happen. 14 years to pay off his 2 wives is an incredibly long time, right? His mom would have been like thinking, it's been 14 years already. This is giving Esau plenty of time to cool down. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. So again, we're seeing that God is being attributed as the one who opens and closes wombs. We've seen this in Abimelech's household. We've seen this in Abraham's case. We've seen this with Isaac and Rebekah. They've had to pray for children. God here it sounds like sovereignly looks at Leah and goes, it's time for her to have children. So again, God is attributed with Leah conceiving and Rachel's barrenness. I'm not saying that's always the case, that it's always God doing something like that. But in these two cases, that's what's happening. We're actually told some of the insight, those insights here in the text. So, and Jacob was to have many descendants. So this is the start of his many descendants. He's going to have 12 sons and at least one daughter that is actually recorded. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." And this is a little bit of how Hagar sounded, right? The Lord has seen me. And so again, that's how she's recognizing God. These sons are being named and then given these phrases with them that kind of live alongside their name. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to the son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I'm not loved, he gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. So again, she's pointing out the Lord sees her and the Lord hears her. So again, that sounds very similar to Hagar. Hagar had been the one that realized that God was one who sees and hears her. And so Leah is feeling very unloved and unseen by her husband, and probably in rivalry with her sister, but she's seeing the favor of God come through children. And she's hoping that somehow that having children is going to change her husband's perspective of her. It doesn't. Again, it's no way to solve marriage problems to add children to it just for that reason. Leah, she conceived and she gave birth to a son. And she said, "Now at last my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons." So he was named Levi. So she's had 3 sons in a row. Rebekah hasn't had any. And then she conceives again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah, and then she stopped having children. So Judah is going to be the one that carries the promised line. We'll talk about why the other 3 didn't necessarily. But again, she has Reuben, and then she has Simeon, and then she has Levi, and then she has Judah. And you just kind of see this progression. She's like, the Lord sees me, the Lord hears me. Hopefully my husband will love me now. And then the last one, she says, and now I'm just going to praise the Lord. It wasn't about her husband anymore. It was really just about praising God for this. It wasn't trying to get something. And then she stops having children. Well, she's probably tired. Her body probably needs some recovery time. 4 children, 4 little ones around. This is a lot, right? In Genesis 30, we will see the sisters get into a childbearing war. And so that's where we're heading now. So Leah has 4 sons. And this is really probably a problem now with Rachel. Right? They've been married the same amount of time. They got married a week apart. So he marries Leah and then he marries Rachel a week later. They both had plenty of time. If you can imagine 4 children, that's over a number of years already has gone by. And so when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." So we see immediately here that Rachel thinks Jacob is in control of giving children, not God. And again, you're going to see this kind of in Rachel. There's going to be times where she steals the family idols. There's things that she's going to be doing that aren't completely in line with a life of godliness that you're going to see, like in Rebekah. Rebekah in her narrative, seemed to get it right. She prayed when she couldn't conceive. She and Isaac knew to do that. She heard God when there was a war in her womb. She went to God and asked, "Why is this happening?" God told her, "You're having twins," right, Rebecca? And he gives her a prophetic word over the boys. And here we just see that Leah is thanking God for these children. She seems a little bit more in tune with that. Here, Rachel seems kind of outside of that. She's saying, "Jacob, why are you doing this to me?" Right? "Give me children or I'll die," which is not true or good at all. And it's jealousy. So again, we will actually find out that Rachel does die in childbirth. It's not actually the withholding of children that kills her. It's actually trying to have children. And so not right off, but in the second child. So Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Jacob is very correct here. He understands it's God. So Leah understands God's the one that gives children. Jacob understands it, but Rachel doesn't. And then he said to her, then she said, again, this is how things get solved, right? And here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her. So Sarah did this with Hagar, and it didn't go well, right? There was immediately jealousy, and Hagar turned on Sarah, and it became this whole family conflict. You've got to think Jacob knows this is not a good idea. But what does he do? So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. And Rachel said, God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son. Because of this, his name shall be Dan. So Rachel said, good enough. If my servant has a child, just call it my own. And, surrogacy or adoption of this kind of feel to it, even though as we move on, even at the end of Jacob's life, he goes, oh, that was Bilhah's child. He doesn't call it Rachel's child. And Jacob does not treat this child like Joseph or one of Rachel's actual natural children. So again, this is Dan. And Rachel felt like this was a vindication of God, that this new third wife, Bilhah, has this child. And so she's in a contest with her sister, basically. So now the two of them are going to continue to compete for Jacob's affection, which Rachel already has. That never really has changed. And also to be looked with favor, like Rachel is saying, well, it's not just my husband that I want. I already have his attention. It was God that vindicated me and given my servant a child. So Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, I have a great struggle with my sister, and I have won. And she named him Naphtali. So obviously there was a lot of rivalry going on between the sisters. And we see this quite regularly, that the woman that doesn't, and even in Hannah's case, in Sarah's case, they're looked down on by the other wife who does have children, probably hounded quite desperately in that time period, blamed even. You get the sense from Sarah, she's like, I can't do this thing. Like, I can't have children. You get the sense that she carries that responsibility. And even in Hannah's case, when she can't have children and the other wife is causing her trouble, and it sounds like tearing her down a lot, her husband goes, but I love you. Isn't that enough? And you get that sense with Jacob. He's like, he doesn't seem to be caring too much about this whole thing. So Bilhah and Rachel seem to make this work between them. Bilhah doesn't seem to turn on Rachel. Rachel seems to accept this child kind of as her own, unlike Sarah and Hagar, which was Abraham trying to get this promised child to make his line, kind of without Sarah. In this case, it doesn't seem that way. Rachel's in really good standing still with Jacob, and there doesn't seem to be too much conflict here between Rachel and Bilhah. The conflict is really between Rachel and Leah. So Bilhah and Rachel are on one side, and Leah and her maid are on the other. So this whole family conflict continues through the rest of Genesis until they reunite in Egypt. So basically, what happens with the wives is going to continue to happen in the sons' lives as well. Then Leah saw that she had stopped having children, and she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, what good fortune, so she named him Gad. So now we're just having sons some more. So again, we're up to 7. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, and Leah said, how happy I am, the woman will call me happy. So she named him Asher. Now we're at 8 sons. So Leah and Zilpah seem to be making this work as well between the two of them. Leah has her own 4 kids, and Zilpah now has 2, and they seem to be able to work this out. They're not despising each other. But we have this 2-camp system that seems to be going on. So during wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too? Very well, Rachel said, he can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. So we get some sense of family dynamics here. Mandrakes were a food, special food he found in the field, so it was something that they probably only got seasonally. Leah is in control of these mandrakes. It's her son who found them. Rachel, it seems, gets to set the schedule of where Jacob sleeps at night. So she's giving permission here. If you'll trade me mandrakes, you can have Jacob's time and affection, which makes sense. As a favored wife, Rachel would be the one that Jacob would want to spend time with. And so what Rachel is really saying is, I want these mandrakes. Why would she be saying that? Well, they were supposedly, from some of the commentaries I was reading, they're supposed to be fertility food. So Rebecca is trying anything she can still to become fertile. The plan of Rachel's doesn't work. It completely backfires. She basically buys these mandrakes off Leah, which is a fertility food, but in exchange, she gives a night with Jacob to Leah. And guess who ends up pregnant? It's Leah. So it's going to show that it depends on God, not on mandrakes. Again, this is what I kind of said about Rachel. She's not really asking God to here and praying. We see her doing everything else. She blames Jacob at first, that she can't have children. Now she's trying to use the folklore of the day to, do fertility treatment, which isn't a real thing as we know now, but for them. So this was probably more in like the mystical, magical camp of fertility treatments. It's not something that would have been in the way of God. It would have been something else. So Rachel kind of takes this road that's a little different. And these things keep getting pointed out. They're real subtle. And again, this is kind of like Jacob buying a birthright from Esau. Leah is kind of buying a night with Jacob, and it becomes really profitable for her. So when Jacob came in the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. You must sleep with me, she said. I've hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband. So she named him Issachar. So again, Leah prays to God instead of believing in mandrakes like Rachel's, right? She's saying that God did this. God rewarded me and gave me this son. It also seems that Jacob just kind of plays along with whatever the wives' conflicts are doing. It doesn't seem like he cares too much about any of this. He has multiple wives, and as long as Rachel, his head wife, is okay with what's going on, it seems that, or she's not to be his head wife. Leah was actually his first wife. She's supposed to be the head wife. We even see that in Leviticus. The first wife is always given privileges. And in this case, Jacob isn't doing that. He's giving those all to Rachel. So again, Leah then conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun. Sometime later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. So Leah has 2 more sons here and a daughter. We're just seeing that she's had 7 children now. The servants, or the third and fourth wives, have had 4 children. This family is getting quite large. We're up to 10 boys and 1 daughter that have been mentioned so far. And so, again, at this point, Leah is still naming her children and saying, this time my husband will treat me with honor because I've borne him 6 sons. This is a lot. Jacob, was a family, as far as we know, of 2 sons. His dad was a family of 1. So having this many children must have been a huge blessing. He's seeing the blessing and favor on his life. This promise that Abraham desperately wanted, Isaac wanted, right? This is a family value to them, to have many children and be multiplied. This is what God has said. This is what a blessed life looks like, is to have many children. And Jacob is getting that. So this has got to be really good for him. And so Leah's like, I'm part of that. I should be honored by him. I'm not disgraced anymore. Like, my husband shouldn't be treating me this way. I should have some respect. And then we come to the story in verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. So maybe she's been praying all along and nothing's been happening, and she's been trying anything else she can. Kind of like Sarah did with Hagar, right? Well, maybe Hagar can have this child instead of me. Like, trying anything. And God's like, you know what? All along, I remembered her, and now it's time. So she became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. She named him Joseph and said, may the Lord add to me another son. So again, this is just part of it. And I want to be clear here, like, there's nothing wrong with going out and adopting children or having children different ways if that's the way God's leading and guiding. Some people, very easily have children. I don't think we should ever put shame on people because of the way they grow their families. This was a very specific situation, and they didn't have all the same options in those times to have adoptions and things like that. So again, they've been working within these things. I don't want to ever say that some of their ideas were wrong. Now, probably marrying more wives was not the plan. Again, that didn't work with Hagar. That's actually something that later in Leviticus kind of gets dealt with a little bit, that kings were not supposed to be multiplying wives. This is not a good idea. This is never a good idea. And by the New Testament time, Paul says you can't even be in church leadership if you have multiple wives. You need to deal with that situation in your household and get down to one wife. That's very much in the New Testament, that no more multiple wives. Like, that is not God's best. It never has been. And so this is not the best situation. I want to make sure that that's clear. Polygamy is just not the best situation. I also just want to make clear that it's not making narrative comment on, adoption or anything like that either. Or that, the only way, like Sarah, is to have your own natural child and to not, adopt or do something else. Again, not polygamy, but, find some other way. And so again, some of those gray lines in morality aren't really discussed. And some of our more modern technology of how children are brought about, again, I'm not commenting on any of that. That's a completely different area than what's being commented on here. So again, Rachel recognizes that it's God this whole time that's had her barren. There's no blaming her husbands. There's no mandrakes, anything mentioned. It's just God that's taken away her disgrace, and she has Joseph. And so again, she's, even as she's having Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." She's saying one isn't enough, right? She's still the one with the least amount of sons. But here we just see that even in this fulfillment for her, she wants more children. And so again, we have a huge family. There's 11 sons, a daughter, and now we're going to kind of jump back into another narrative before we get to the last son, Benjamin, because that's a much bigger narrative, because Rachel ends up dying in that one. And so again, we're 11 sons and a daughter, and they're in the land with Laban. This is what Jacob's been working for 14 years, is to have two wives who are now very multiplicative, right? They're having all these children. So in verse 25, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland." Jacob's ready to go home. He hasn't gotten the letter from his mom, it doesn't sound like, and it hasn't God's calling, but he wants to leave. So he says, "Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." So after these 14 years, Jacob's 91, and he's ready to leave. He's not actually going to leave. This is just a brokerage at this point. He's going to actually work 20 years and be 97 years old before he returns to the promised land. In these, so far, 13 years have passed. He has 11 sons and a daughter, and he's going to work for Laban a total of 7 more years, of 20 years. So Laban said to him, "If I found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages and I will pay them." So this is difficult. Laban is obviously showing that he does not follow God. He's doing divination. He does not need to do divination to know that God is the one that's blessing Jacob. He could have just asked Jacob, "Why are you so blessed?" And he would have told him, "It's God. God came with me. My God is here with me, and he's the one blessing me. He blessed my Abraham and Isaac and now me." Divination is never right, but it is the way Laban does things. And sometimes, even in divination, you come to the right answers, even though that's not the way you should be getting those answers. So Laban basically says, "Name your wages. I really like this blessing. My herds are doing well. Everything's doing well here." And also, he doesn't want his daughters to leave. We'll find that out later. So again, this is part of the reason Abram had to leave the area of Haran, is because his family was practicing divination, probably worshiping a moon god. Like I said, a lot of their names point to them being named after moon gods and other things. And so that's part of the reason that they really weren't supposed to be there. And Jacob was going to need to leave. Again, we just see, though, that God is with Jacob and bringing huge blessings to this household. We see that in other time periods, too. Whenever God's blessing something, there's a lot of prosperity that comes to people groups and things wherever they might be at that time. So in verse 29, Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, may I do something for your own household? What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied, "but if you'll do this one thing, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted and speckled goat. They'll be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future whenever you check on the wages you've paid me. Any goat in my possession that's not speckled or spotted, or lamb that is not dark colored, will be considered stolen. So Jacob has this idea. You need to pay me in sheep, not just 2 wives. I've worked for you a long time. Let me take a little bit of the herd, and I'm going to start growing my own herd. You can keep your herd, but this is the way we're going to do it. I will take the genetically very different, and at this time, black or spotted or speckled, it wasn't that they were worth less money or something like that. They were just distinct, right? They were different color. You could tell the herds apart by looking. And there have been a lot fewer. Some commentaries say that this would have been a very minority recessive trait at the time to have speckled, dark colored lambs and goats. And so he's saying, let me just take this small amount. One commentator remarked that usually a fair wage at the time for somebody in Jacob's position would have been 10 to 20% of a herd. But this genetic type thing is estimated to be lower than that. So Jacob's basically saying, typically you would pay 10 to 20%. He knows that this will probably work with Laban. You normally would have had to pay me 10 to 20%, but what if 5 to 10% or something along those lines? This genetic recessive trait, I'll take these. And then, my herd shouldn't be multiplying like yours. You never see that many black and spotted in your type of goats and sheep that you have. That breed doesn't do that. So I'll just take these and this will be mine. And we can be side by side because we'll always be able to split these out. No problem. Okay, so agreed, said Laban. Let it be as you have said. That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Wait a second. Jacob says, let it be just as you said. And then he does something different. He separates them, gives Jacob the smaller flock, the minority flock of different colored animals. Again, maybe not worth less money or worth less for their things, but just different. And so it was just a good way to separate them. But he puts a 3-day journey between his flock and Jacob. So he does not trust Jacob. There's no trust between these two, right? They've both been known for their deceptions. And so Laban here is like, no, even though we can tell them apart, you take yours way over there. I don't want them even around my sheep. So, and by doing that, he's thinking, oh, good, I can get rid of all those genetics out of my flock, right? Because typically you might see a white sheep and a speckled sheep, and maybe you'll have a speckled sheep every now and then, baby. And so he's like, I don't want any of them with my sheep. That would actually, maybe I can get my sheep to be more just this homogeneous color and like this, and then I don't have to give any more to Jacob, because Jacob is going to continue to earn any of the spotted, speckled, and black sheep as time goes on. So this isn't just a one-time separation. This is an ongoing thing. So again, Jacob's plan was distinguished by color, but Laban says, let's put space between us. Again, by removing them, he's actually removing the genetic pool. So he's trying, and they wouldn't have called it genetics back then, but they would have understood that breeding different kinds of animals, what colors of animals produce offspring that are similar, those kinds of things. So again, Jacob is going to come up with this idea, and there is no science behind this at all. I was going to say that up front. This is a weird thing that just shows up in the narrative of Jacob trying to be cunning. It works out because God's behind Jacob anyway. So again, sometimes we see a lot of effort being put into something, and God's like, I'm going to bless it anyway. Whatever you're doing doesn't really matter. Jacob took fresh cut branches of poplar, planes them, stripes them. Again, every commentary I read, and I went through a lot of them to see if there was anything to this. And he puts these peeled branches in the water in front of the flock when they come to drink. And so that way they would mate in front of these branches, and they'd see spots and speckles as they're mating. Again, there's no reason this should have worked at all. And then he separates the flocks, and then whenever the stronger females were in heat, he'd put these branches in, and then they would have spotted and speckled babies. Again, we'll see later on that he thinks that this is what's working, and it is. I mean, in the way. So again, Jacob gets all the strong baby sheep and goats. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to his own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. So he just becomes incredibly prosperous. Now that he has something, God can bless and multiply it. And so anytime Jacob gets anything, it just becomes blessed and multiplied. He has wives, they bless and multiply with children. He has livestock, blessed and multiplied. And so we see this go on, that Jacob is prosperous, and it's not attributed to God right here. He thinks his own craftiness has done it by peeling these branches and doing all this stuff, and he's spending a lot of effort on it. Again, like I said, there was no scientific basis to this. There was no reason to believe that this is something that should have worked. And so again, we're seeing both Laban and Jacob kind of playing games here. They're trying to grow their own stuff more than the other. Again, there's favor involved, so both of them are going to have things that prosper. Laban also, will find out, doesn't really want his daughters to leave. That's part of the reason he's giving this deal to Jacob. He doesn't want all his grandchildren leaving. And so this is kind of his way of trying to hold Jacob back from what Jacob's called to do. And we kind of see that in some of the other stories. That's why Abraham had to leave. That's why some of these separations become really important in these stories, is when God asks them to do something, to leave again, it will bring out what they need to do. So we're going to stop there with the narratives. We'll get back to Jacob's story in the next one. But that's sort of where we're going to just leave off, is that he and Laban are in this. Laban's deceived him about the wives. Laban has caused issues with the flocks. And then now they're still side by side trying to work through this. And that separation will come, but it hasn't yet.